Hello everyone, I am Dr. Tawab, co-chair of ISPRM Communications Committee, and now I have with me Dr. David Putrino, who just delivered an amazing lecture on the use of technologies in rehabilitation. So, Dr. David, as of now, there are so many technologies that can be used in rehabilitation right now. So, out of these, as according to you, what do you think what are the three most promising technologies that are out there right now?
Right now, I'm really interested in invasive neurostimulation technology for motor recovery. I think that between epidural spinal stimulation, implanted vagus nerve stimulation, we're seeing a complete paradigm shift in outcomes that weren't possible for people with chronic motor dysfunction years ago.
Yeah.
So we're really seeing a change in what is possible. So those are technologies that are exciting me. I'm also very interested in brain-computer interface technologies. We've been running a clinical trial on one particular brain-computer interface technology called Synchron, but there are also about 4 other technologies out there that are, aiming to be consumer devices. And I think that this is going to disrupt what was possible for people who are locked in, people who have severe quadriplegia, and so those are very exciting things. And then the other thing that I'm very interested in is the intersection of things like implanted neurostimulation and smarter home rehab technologies like tele-rehab. With epidural spinal stim and vagus nerve stim, you need many hours of rehab still. And so a lot of the time, that's not feasible to come to a location to get that every day. Now, the extent to which we can pair implanted stim with a home-based system, which allows a patient to perform, many repetitions of a movement in a gamified environment with a smart sensor that switches the stimulation on when you need it and switches it off when you don't. I think that that's a really exciting next step for the rehab field.
So, how do you think that these invasive neurostimulation interventions, how can they actually change the impact in the life of the patients who will be obviously using them later on?
About a year ago, I published an opinion piece with John Krakauer, who's a neurologist out of Johns Hopkins University. And, we were really talking about the fact that a lot of neurotechnologies have failed to really move the needle on outcomes like we would like. So you can do intensive tele-rehab and you might gain 4 or 5 points on the Fugl-Meyer, or you can do, TDCS and maybe if a miracle happens, you might get, 3 or 4 points on the Fugl-Meyer, But as to technologies that are really changing what's possible for a patient, we're not seeing big effect sizes. And in many ways, a lot of the promise that we had a decade ago of all of these technologies isn't really getting there when we do meaningful clinical trials. But now we have these new tools, and suddenly, epidural spinal stimulation, you look at the work that's happening in Switzerland and in Louisville, Kentucky, people are walking again. We look at the work that's being done by Steve Kramer and others with the vagus nerve stimulation. People are going from stuck in a flexus energy to shaking hands. You look at the upper extremity epidural spinal work that was published in Science not so long ago. Nature Medicine not so long ago. And again, you're seeing double-digit changes in the Fugl-Meyer and freedom from synergy and reduction of tone. So suddenly, where before we were sort of, the old school arguments, upper extremity robotics. Can we really tell if they're making a difference? The new generation of technologies, it's undeniable. It's someone is shaking your hand now.
You can see it now.
You can see it.
It's not just the digits and the numbers, it's just you can see it.
A visible change, and so that's where I get a lot of hope. Because before I was like, well, if you need a clinical trial to tell you if this is working to a marginal p-value, maybe it's not worth the bother or the expense or the trouble. But when someone can walk up to you when they couldn't walk before, or they can shake your hand when they couldn't shake it, that's change, and there's no doubt that is valuable.
And how do you envision that this technology, how will it be adapted, keeping in view that demographic changes and among the various countries, including higher income countries, including the lower middle income countries? How do you envision it being adapted in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, I always think that the thing that we need to work hard for is the financial argument for these cases. You know, the idea that if someone is able to shower themselves, if someone is able to wash themselves, if someone is able to, you know, take care of a lot of their self-care activities, then you can make a financial argument to the government that this is something that is worth doing. And it's always an uphill battle. It's always hard to change people's minds. But again, what I'm really hoping is that the sheer impressiveness of the outcomes that we're seeing should be enough to actually wow people to say, okay, well, we've got something here. We should do this. Especially since many of these technologies are already, they're repurposed from standard of care in other cases. You know, epidural spinal stim, you can use a spinal cord stimulator that is being used for chronic pain, and vagus nerve, you know, for depression and epilepsy. So it's not too much of a stretch because these aren't completely novel technologies, and so that's where my hope comes from, at least.
Thank you so much, Dr. David, for giving us your time. So hopefully see you around.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to speak here today.
Thank you so much.